Well, we are here to celebrate something wonderful, aren't we? We're here in a community where history was made. History not just for this city, but for this nation, for this entire world. This is a neighborhood where a whole movement began that changed the lives of so many millions of people and changed our society forever and for the better. We are all poised with tremendous pride in New York City for the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Rebellion. And we know that we're going to have not only a moment to celebrate, to reflect, to energize, but we're also looking forward to something absolutely extraordinary because World Pride is coming to New York City. And today, we announce something so important, that this city will honor 2 trans women who changed New York City forever and for the better. Now, our First Lady will have the honor of making the formal announcement. But I want to say to everyone who's here, thank you. Thank you for joining in this historic moment. Thank you for fighting for the rights of everyone who's a member of the trans community and fighting for the rights of all New Yorkers, all Americans, all people, because we are all fighting for each other's respect and dignity. I want to thank the members of the administration who are here, for whom this effort is a labor of love for sure. Our Cultural Affairs Commissioner, Tom Finkelpearl. Thank you, Tom. And the woman who has undoubtedly the best job in city government, our Senior Executive Director for the Office of Nightlife, Ariel Palitz. Thank you. We got like 1 million applications for that job. Like, wait, I get paid to do nightlife? Let's go. So, and a group of people who really deserves recognition because they worked hard to get us to this day, the She Built NYC Advisory Panel. Let's thank all of them. Now, for a long time, and even to this day, too often, and this is a painful reality, too often trans people are invisible to our society. Too often, trans people are victimized. Too often, they go through unimaginable bigotry and violence, even murder. We're here to celebrate people who stood up. We're here to celebrate changes that have been made, but we have more to do. We have more to do to work for that day where there's real and consistent respect and recognition. Just in the last few weeks, we're mourning the loss of trans women of color, including Malaysia Booker, and Claire Legato, and Michelle Tamika Washington. And this is happening against a backdrop in our country where our federal government is working overtime to take away rights from trans people, including the right to serve their nation in our military. We have to stand up against that. We have to be a beacon here in this city, and we have to unite with others who don't accept that kind of division and subjugation of our fellow human beings, our fellow Americans. And we in this city, we are proud in so many ways, the most diverse city on this earth. We are proud to have the largest LGBTQ community anywhere. And we as New Yorkers, we don't get intimidated, do we? If you affront us, we don't shirk, we don't turn away. We redouble our efforts. We are resilient, we are strong, and we stand up, and we understand we're all in this together, right? Yes. That's who we are. In this city, we ended bathroom bigotry. We made sure that birth certificates reflect gender identity. We created more and more shelter beds for runaway youth and centers for LGBTQ seniors. I'm going to turn in a little bit to Speaker Corey Johnson. I want to thank him and the entire City Council for constantly pushing the spectrum and going farther and farther for our youth, for our seniors, for trans people. What we do today is so important because we understand that in our society, we take very serious messages and cues from who gets honored. And for a long, long time, this is something Chirlane and I have talked about a lot, that our city, our country, we've reflected very, very narrowly our history. Who did all the work? Who made us great? Who provided the leadership? It was often presented in the most narrow way possible. And so many heroes were ignored. Everyday heroes and famous names alike, simply because of who they were, who they loved, the color of their skin. Putting up statues doesn't change everything, but it sends a powerful message. It starts to change things. It starts to change hearts and minds. And it's very important also because as we're about to celebrate this 50th anniversary, we're able to point to that one moment when things began to change. We actually know where it began. And we know that trans people were part of that rebellion. They were part of that movement. In fact, they were leaders of that crucial moment in history. So we want to celebrate them. We want to acknowledge them. We want to honor them because they lived their truth and they made history. And we want to make sure those contributions are never diminished, never forgotten. And it comes down to this, that when you really reflect the truth of history, it inspires. So imagine a young trans person trying to make sense of the world around with them, grappling with who they are in this society, and they come down here, and they go down Christopher Street, and they see the images of great heroes. They see statues of two remarkable New Yorkers, two everyday people who decided that things had to change. Two people believed that if they put themselves forward and they took the slings and arrows and they went through all the challenges, all the pain, that somehow they could make life better for everyone else. And indeed they did. That's what we celebrate today. Let me say a few words in Spanish. Al celebrar los 50 años de Stonewall, estamos honrando a dos mujeres transgénero que ayudaron a dirigir el movimiento. Nos complace poder honrarlas y asegurar que siempre recordemos sus aportes en la lucha por la igualdad de todos los géneros. And now, my pleasure to turn to someone who literally her whole adult life she has been fighting for the rights of all people, for the rights of people in the LGBTQ community. She has never met a stigma that she accepts. She's never met a taboo that she would just walk on by. She has decided to battle division every single time and to work so hard to open hearts and minds. Our First Lady, Chirlane McCray.
Thank you, Bill. Good afternoon, everyone. Are you ready to have some fun? Yeah. Is it okay with everyone if we start Pride early? Yeah. Good. Yeah, right. I know, there's no Pride Future Month. It's Pride every day. Well, we're on a mission right now because history has tried to forget some of our heroes. But we're not going to let that happen, are we? No. Most people probably don't think very much about who gets to be a hero in our society. You know, we got Superman and Spider-Man and Santa Claus, and I don't know. Many people don't know what it's like to be harassed every day Many don't know what it's like to be mocked just for being who they are, to be made to feel less than, to be rendered invisible in the media landscape, to have one's contributions and courage go unrecognized. But there are people in this room today who know exactly what that feels like. There are people in our city and in our country who know exactly what that feels like. Today's announcement is for all of us, but especially for them. Our history helps define our present and shape our future. But the histories written by white, straight, cisgender men rarely tell the full story. It is, just as the African proverb reminds us, until the lion learns to write, every story will glorify the hunter. The contributions of too many women, LGBTQ people, people of color, and people living on the margins of society have been obscured or erased entirely. But now, the lions are writing. They are writing and roaring loudly, because these stories must be told, heard, and celebrated. That's why last year we set out to fix a glaring gender imbalance in our city's public spaces with She Built NYC. So far, we've announced 5 new monuments honoring trailblazing women, 1 in each borough. And today, as we prepare to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising and the movement it sparked, we will add 2 new names to the list. Are you ready for them? Yes. Woo. They are Marsha P. Johnson. And Sylvia Rivera. Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera are undeniably 2 of the most important foremothers of the modern LGBTQ movement. From their leading role at Stonewall to their revolutionary work supporting transgender and gender nonconforming youth, they charted a path for all the activists who came after them. Marsha and Sylvia were unapologetic about who they were at a time when living their truth meant arrests, beatings, unemployment, and homelessness. Years after Stonewall, Sylvia said, "I'm not going to change for anybody. If I change, then I feel like I'm losing what 1969 brought into my life, and that was to be totally free." Today, Marsha and Sylvia together, Marsha and Sylvia founded Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, or STAR, a groundbreaking initiative to support and house trans people and drag queens, especially young people who are forced to leave their own homes. It's widely recognized as the first LGBTQ youth homeless shelter in the country. Separately and together, Marsha and Sylvia fought against police brutality, poverty, incarceration, racism, HIV, and AIDS. They were survivors who made it their mission to help others survive. Social justice warriors who never stopped fighting for liberation. Because as Marsha once said, you never completely have your rights until you all have your rights. But Marsha and Sylvia and many other trans people of color who led the way have not gotten their due in history. Marginalized even within the movement they helped create. Their stories have since been minimized and whitewashed in Hollywood movies and public art. Today, we correct that record with the first ever permanent public artwork honoring trans women in the world. The city Marsha and Sylvia called home will not erase them. We will give them a fitting place of honor along Christopher Street, a place that knew them well, and a long-time safe haven for trans and queer youth. And we will tell their stories for generations to come. But to honor activists like Marsha and Sylvia, we must do more than share stories. We must continue their fights. Today, trans people are still scorned, verbally abused, physically attacked, and sometimes killed for living openly as themselves, especially Black trans women and other trans women of color. LGBTQ youth, it continue to experience higher rates of homelessness and unemployment, harassment, and hopelessness. The White House has consistently been hostile to trans people, emboldened acts of hatred and violence against them, and challenged their ability to serve their country, access safe housing, shelter, and get basic health care. In New York City, we are showing the world a better way by carrying out the legacy of activism that Marsha and Sylvia left behind. Inspired by the work of STAR, we founded the NYC Unity Project, which is our unwavering commitment to support LGBTQ youth, from providing shelter to guaranteeing health care to helping families accept and understand their children. There are now many, many more services and resources available at nyc.gov/unityproject to help all LGBTQ young people in New York City feel safe, supported, and healthy. And now, our new monument will proudly remind the world that hate has no place in New York City. Homophobia and transphobia have no place here. We are the city of Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, and we choose love every time. I hope this announcement also sends a clear and unequivocal message to our trans and non-binary siblings who may be struggling as a result of the hostility they continue to face across the city and across the country. Our struggles are tied together. We see you. We honor you. We love you. As you stand in your full power, living your truth, know that your city has your back. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce a leader and activist who intimately understands the importance of Marsha and Sylvia's legacy. From the boardroom to film and television sets, and even the Obama White House, she is a leading figure of success and strength in the movement for transgender and racial equality. Currently, she stars in the FX series Pose. Which made history with the largest transgender cast ever for a scripted series. It also happens to be one of my all-time favorites. Please join me in welcoming Angelica Ross.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the First Lady of New York. Thank you to the mayor. Thank you to all of Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P's descendants, the ones that could be here, the ones that could not be here. Thank you, most importantly, as well, to my trans community, the ones that could be here. I recognize so many faces from the movement. So thank you. I'm honored as one of the ambassadors of the 50th anniversary of Stonewall. I am truly honored to be here today. This is a brand new day, one that I would say that I thought would never happen, but considering I'm a Black trans woman over 35, but to be real with you, I, along with many other people in the trans community, some you see behind me right now, we didn't just dream of this day, we worked for this day. We fought for this day. And we prayed for moments just like this where the trans community, we would realize that our lives didn't just matter, but also they are being recognized and honored. It has been healing to witness statues and symbols of white supremacy come down and symbols of strength and courage like that of Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera go up. So today is a win, a long overdue win, but indeed it's a win that we need to celebrate together. And as we celebrate today, I want to offer, as the Buddhist, a Buddhist perspective of this glorious statue of Marsha P. and Sylvia Rivera. Let this be a reminder, and more so a reflection. When you see these monuments, let it remind you of the unpaid and unrecognized labor that trans women put in every day to set us all free. Let the strength and the courage of Marsha and Sylvia remind us of our own strength and courage to stand up for what's right, because there are countless Black and brown trans women right now today across America, like these transcestors, who with Star House have to sell themselves and their own time in order to fund their nonprofits and their advocacy work, because we're competing with our cis gay allies for funding, resulting in situations where gays and lesbians and gay and lesbian centered organizations are given resources to speak on our behalf and get half as much done as we do with half as much money and resources. And when I say, prostituting or selling ourselves, I want to be clear that that's just not solely a sexual act. It's a spiritual one. One that, as explained by Carolyn Miss in Anatomy of the Spirit, can be a sacred act, especially when one is not lying to themselves about the exchange and combines it with intention. The trans-African proverb puts it like this: it is what it is. So for years, I did what I had to do to fund trans tech, since we weren't getting grants and love from major donors. And as a trans community, we will continue to do what we have to do to protect and support our own when no one else will. But please, let this inspire you to take action, like Marsha and Sylvia took action, and countless other trans folks are taking action today towards liberating us all. Thank you.
Angelica, thank you. And I just have to tell you, we were talking outside. For so many of us, it's just been a revelation to see Pose and the extraordinary performances and the love and the heart. And it's just something that's uplifted everybody. I want to thank you and all your castmates, everyone involved. Thank you. Well, everyone feels like family here, but I want to introduce someone who's actually specifically family, Marsha's nephew, Al Michaels. And he is here. Come on up, Al. He's here with his mother, Marsha's sister, Jean. And he's going to talk about what Marsha meant to the family and the impact that she has had on all of us. Thank you. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. What's that? Thank you. Come on up.
Let me get these old man glasses. First of all, it's an honor to be up here with all these distinguished people and all the community. Thank you for everything you've done for my uncle. Good afternoon. My name is Al Michaels. Marsha was my aunt. My mother, Jean, is Marsha's sister. She's over here in the red hat, wearing the flowers of her brother, and they all like flowers. Before I tell you about Marsha, I want to thank the mayor and the First Lady for making today possible. It's hard to believe that our family will have a monument, Marsha and Sylvia, in Greenwich Village. Words can't express what this means to us. I knew Marsha as Uncle Mikey, and of course, as Aunt Marsha. So please forgive me if I slip and call her he. I don't mean any disrespect. Growing up, my grandmother and grandfather struggled to adapt to Uncle Mikey dressing as a woman. She would yell and try to get him to come inside so the neighbors wouldn't see him. I think I missed this here. Oh. It wasn't because she was ashamed of Marsha. It was because she was worried about Marsha's safety. And for those of you who knew Marsha, she didn't care what anybody thought of her. She just believed in spreading love and respect. I was a little kid, but that was when Marsha taught me to never apologize for who I am. And I think she taught so many others to believe in themselves. You see, I didn't realize until I was a teenager who Marsha really was. Photographed by Warhol, tearing up and down the streets in the village, fighting for gay rights, at a time when the movement wasn't sure if they wanted Marsha on their team. Marsha and Sylvia didn't care if they were invited to the party. They held their own meetings and rallies and made an impact larger than themselves. They took in kids whose families kicked them out their homes for being gay or trans. You know, Marsha had a dream to move to New York City, and my grandfather forbade her from moving until she graduated high school. He said, you will finish what you start. So as soon as Marsha graduated, she bolted for the city. She had $15 in her pocket, and with that $15, she became the mayor of Greenwich Village, started a revolution, and sadly, died a violent death. But today, Marsha and Sylvia are having their day, getting a monument. If that's not a New York story, I don't know what is. Please join me in celebrating the life of my aunt, Marsha, my Aunt Marsha. Thank you.
I want to first, some other members of the administration are here that I did not recognize earlier. I want to thank our Deputy Mayor, Vicki Bean, and the Chair and Commissioner of the Human Rights Commission, Carmela Malalis. I have been so moved to watch the leadership of Speaker Corey Johnson fighting for everyone's rights, but ensuring that the rights of the trans community was finally, truly recognized, particularly with the bill related to birth certificates. And as we all know, to get change in our society, it often runs through legislation. And that means a debate, and that means educating people, and that means involving people and mobilizing people. And those are the things that Corey has done throughout his life and career. And I know this is a very special day for him. Speaker Corey Johnson.
Good afternoon. I am a little emotional and verklempt, you know, standing here hearing the really remarkable, beautiful introduction and speech by the First Lady. I thought it was just so moving and provided such an important historical context to why we're here today and to what we're doing, and to hear Angelica, who I am totally enamored with, and I literally just spent, I didn't know you were going to be here today, so I didn't do this purposefully, but this past weekend I watched all eight episodes of Pose in a row over the weekend, and I am excited next week for the season 2 premiere. So thank you for being here. I'm emotional because of, I really think, the eloquence and the beautiful words that we heard on why and how this is so important, not just to the trans community, but to New York City. And I'm emotional, I get emotional actually often standing in this room because we're standing on hallowed ground in this room. I want to thank the mayor. I've worked with the mayor as speaker for the last year and a half, and we jointly announced 2 weeks ago that coming up next month, in the month of June, commemorating the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, that the LGBT Center is slated to be designated a historic landmark in New York City because of the cultural significance and value. It is already protected because it's part of the Greenwich Village Historic District, but we wanted to give it even more recognition because of what happened. And what happened in this room is where ACT UP was founded. And as the only openly HIV positive elected official in the state of New York, it is incredibly moving for me to stand in a room that really made all of this possible for me. I wouldn't be standing here today, and openly gay, 37-year-old HIV positive man as Speaker of the New York City Council, if it wasn't for the brave men and women and trans men and trans women who were part of ACT UP and fighting for life-saving medication. And I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for two amazing heroes that we're honoring today, Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. Their fight for LGBT equality inspired change, not just in New York City, but across our nation and around the world. And next month, 50 years since the Stonewall Uprising, we still have an enormous amount of work to do. It's been said, but it should be repeated. The trans community, particularly trans women of color, are subjected to unacceptable levels of violence every single day across the country and even here in our city, in New York City. This year, which isn't even half over, 5 transgender Americans, at least that's what we know right now, it's probably higher, were killed. All of them were Black trans women. Dana Martin in Alabama, Ashanti Carmen in Maryland, Claire Legato in Cleveland, Malaysia Booker in Dallas, and Michelle Tamika Washington in Philadelphia. Today we are sending a message. New York City loves, honors, and respects the trans community. We value everything they have done for our city and for our country. And that's a message that I don't want to be saying 50 years after Stonewall, but it's a message I will say today and every day until the violence stops. It's a message I will say until trans men and women can serve openly in our armed forces. It's a message I will say until the Department of Housing and Urban Development stops stripping the trans community of shelter protections. This monument will inspire future LGBTQ people to continue fighting for equality for all. I really want to thank the She Built NYC committee led by the First Lady for making this monument the first in the world to honor transgender people, particularly 2 trans women of color. We are leading on this issue. I couldn't be prouder as a New Yorker. I'm very lucky. I see a friend here, Jerry, from the Leslie Lohman Museum. And in my office inside of City Hall, when you walk into the door entering my office, on both sides of that door are 2 photos. On the right, when I walk through every single day, I look at both of them. On the right is a photo of Sylvia Rivera. And on the left is a photo of Marsha P. Johnson. Those photos hung before I knew these statues were going to go up. They've been there for a year and a half, and the photos are them at a protest outside of Bellevue Hospital, protesting the way people were being treated who had HIV and AIDS in the late 1980s. I stand here today looking at so many friends who are joining us. I saw my good friend Cecilia Gentili getting emotional hearing the First Lady speak. And I think it's also important to say that there are currently 5 openly LGBT members of the City Council, though it's really 5G members of the New York City Council. 5 gay men, some of them who are gay men of color. And what we need to do in 2.5 years, all 5 of us will be term limited out of the City Council. And we need to ensure that in 2021, we elect a historic number of LGBT new council members, and we need to finally elect some transgender council members in New York City, representing neighborhoods across New York City. And there are some who I think are going to run, who are here today, which is very exciting. I'll end with this. New York City is the greatest city in the world. We are the city that gave the world J-Lo and Marsha P. Johnson. We are the city that gave the world Barbara Streisand and Sylvia Rivera. We are the city of the lemon ice king of Corona. We are the city that built the Empire State Building in less than 2 years. We're the city that not that far from here in New York Harbor, the Statue of Liberty stands with a torch as a beacon to immigrants and refugees and asylum seekers from all over the world. We are the city that currently 38% of New Yorkers were not born in the United States of America, but came here with dreams and aspirations for themselves and for their family. We are the city that 50 years ago, in just a few weeks, a match was lit on Christopher Street to spark a movement for worldwide equality. And we are now the city that will have the first, I'm getting the chills saying it, the first statues for transgender history makers in the world. Let's keep being the greatest city in the world. Happy Pride. Thank you very much. And I want to acknowledge we're joined by the chair of our LGBT caucus, Danny Drum, and the chair of our Libraries and Cultural Affairs Committee, Jimmy Van Bramer, 2 of the 5 G members of the New York City Council.
Thank you so much, Corey. And you mentioned Cecilia. She is a tenacious leader in the trans Latinx community. She started Transgender Equity Consulting after serving as the Director of Policy at GMHC. Our pleasure to bring forward Cecilia Gentili.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I always wanted the mayor to push this thing like this, like he does for the First Lady. And there's a dream come true today. So thank you all so much. Thank you so much, Mayor. Thank you so much, First Lady. Thank you so much, Angelica, my dear speaker, Marsha's family, Danny, Jimmy, and my adorer Reina. So thank you so much. This is I came out at age 17, and I really didn't learn about Marsha and Sylvia until I came to at age 17 when they told me like what was going on in the United States, and I didn't know what I was gonna do with my life. Today is a wonderful opportunity to recognize these 2 amazing pillars of our history. But the most important part of all of these is like people like me and people like everybody here that identify as trans are gonna be able to see themselves reflected in this important point of the city and say, me as a trans person, I see myself reflected. Me as a person of color, I see myself reflected. Me as a former sex worker, I see myself reflected. Me as a person who lived in this city for 10 years as an undocumented person, I see myself reflected. We are a community, and as many of you said, Marsha and Sylvia were there fighting for LGBT rights. It is time for the L, the G, and the B to return that favor. And you all have an opportunity to do that today. Our elected officials to continue to push for legislation that help us have a better life. Our speaker to continue to give us this amazing funding that we need to do trans work. And to all my friends here that do advocacy, to continue doing the work that they do, because it's for all of you, the transgender New Yorkers, have a better life. So each one of you that work in a nonprofit, thank you. I wanted to recognize allies. I was part of She Built and the selection process. And I was thrilled when we made our nominations. I thought I was gonna be the only one nominating Sylvia and Marsha. It was many allies that nominated Sylvia and Marsha, and they were right there in the first group of women to be honored by She Built. And that's such an accomplishment. It is a time where we all have to stand together. At this time where bigotry and transphobia coming for the federal government, it's time for that transphobia and that bigotry to find a stop in the city of New York, and we are doing it. And trust me, Speaker, it will be a lot of tea at the council in 2021. Thank you.
as we look ahead to this 50th anniversary and to hosting World Pride, it's a great pleasure to bring up someone who's been instrumental in all of the celebrations in recent years, and this is going to be the greatest of them all. The Executive Director of New York City Pride since 2009, Chris Frederick.
Thank you to the Mayor, First Lady. Thank you for having me here as we witness long overdue history in the making. On behalf of the staff and thousands of NYC Pride volunteers, we're honored to join you in paying tribute to Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. As NYC Pride prepares to welcome millions to New York for the commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots and the first World Pride ever to be hosted in the United States, it is humbling to be with you as the city honors these two trailblazers from the LGBTQIA+ community. In 2019, as our community continues to fight for our rights and respect, we do so remembering that in 1969, the very notion of coming out, never mind being out and genuine in the manners Sylvia and Marsha did, was unimaginable. They risked it all to be themselves and often paid the price. Yes, they persevered and continue to work for trans rights, support trans youth, and advocate for trans people within the larger community. As we know, on June 28, 1969, patrons of the Stonewall Inn fought it back against police mistreatment and abuse mere blocks from where we are standing today. The Stonewall Inn was one of the few bars that allowed dancing and also welcomed trans people who at the time were completely marginalized, even in the small but growing gay community. But that never stopped Sylvia and Marsha, who often confronted the more mainstream gay community on issues of racism, sexism, and what we would now call transphobia. We know all too well at NYC Pride, like all of our LGBTQIA organizations, that we can and should do a better job centering the stories and voices of trans people. And this recognition serves as a reminder to do better, be even more intentional and proactive, and provide much needed space for trans inclusion in every facet of our work. As we approach the anniversary of this moment in history, half a century later, we will revisit, educate, and honor those who stood up, fought back, and importantly, lift up the stories of those who fought multiple biases, transphobia, sexism, racism, classism, within and outside of our very own communities. After the riots, Johnson and Riviera started STAR, an organization dedicated to serving young homeless drag queens and trans women of color. They never gave up and were resilient in the face of so many obstacles. And despite some progress, 50 years later, LGBTQIA+ people of color, and especially trans and gender nonconforming people of color, continue to be the most vulnerable members in our community. And for the progress we've made and for the work still to be done, these statues will remind us that we have Johnson and Riviera to thank for so much, and that it is upon their shoulders we stand. The reality is that we have seen spikes in hate crimes in many diverse communities, including our LGBTQIA+ populations, and the populations targeted most disproportionately, trans and queer people of color. And many survivors of anti-LGBTQIA+ violence around the country report that police were hostile or indifferent when they reported the crimes. As a result, many choose not to report, so the numbers are likely worse than we know. And while we may see social media posts on spot media, rarely does the media cover the epidemic of violence or even individual cases. The statues will stand a vigilant reminder to tell these stories. NYC Pride is thrilled to have Monica Helms, creator of the Trans Flag, and the cast of Pose, the most trans-inclusive television program in history, today represented by the extraordinary Angelica Ross, as Grand Marshals in what will be the largest Pride March ever. Front and center as role models and inspirations, I would like to think Sylvia and Marsha would be pleased. As we begin a Pride season that will be historic, in fact, like none other in history, we must remain vigilant and honor and recognize both the past and the future as we continue to work towards a time when everyone in our community is treated equally and with respect. Thank you.
We're going to have 3 more speakers, but I also want to acknowledge and thank from our administration, Faye Penn, the executive director, excuse me, let me get this wrong. Faye Penn, executive director of Women.NYC. Right? I got it right? Faye, thank you. And the next speaker is truly someone who understands the power of this moment. As a filmmaker, the co-director of the film about the life of Marsha P. Johnson called Happy Birthday, Marsha. Also, a fierce advocate working, among other places, with the Sylvia Rivera Law Project. It's my great pleasure to introduce Tourmaline.
Thank you so much. I've been coming to the center. I moved to New York almost 20 years ago, and I've been coming for so long. And it's just kind of surreal to have a day like today where we're making monuments to people who've been my heroes for so long. When, back in the day, a lot of people didn't know about Sylvia or Marsha. And I remember getting DVDs from Randy Wicker, and uploading them online of Sylvia Rivera and Marsha B. Johnson. Marsha used to live with Randy for like 15 years. And so it's so surreal, and I'd like to thank the mayor and the first lady for making this moment happen, and everyone in the room who has been fighting for so long for recognition and to be represented for making this happen. I'm thinking about how Marsha P. Johnson would be 73 years old today, and Sylvia Rivera would be 67. Among many things, Marsha and Sylvia were the founders of the modern-day queer liberation movement, right? They were looking to change and make change happen at the root. And that was born out of the rebellion protesting police violence against Black and brown trans people 50 years ago in this neighborhood. While often Sylvia and Marsha are remembered for their actions at Stonewall, it is vital to center the work they did after. They helped organize the first Pride March. It was then called the Christopher Street Liberation Day, which started at the Women's House of Detention Center, which held members of the Black Panther Party at the time. And they did that on purpose, right, to really make plain the connections between incarceration and policing of the LGBT community. And I love that they arrived there chanting, "Free our sisters, free ourselves," right? They knew, like that sign says, that there can't be pride for some of us without liberation for all of us, right? They knew that at their core. And they were unruly, and I think that's part of why I'm kind of starstruck. We're celebrating really unruly, ungovernable people, right? They fought back against respectability politics by providing mutual aid for people with HIV and AIDS. They did sex work. They were disabled. They supported other disabled people who were homeless, incarcerated, and often policed. Sylvia herself was banned from the LGBT Center, right, for calling out classism in the mainstream white gay rights movement. And so I think it is so powerful that we're returning to this moment and centering someone who got us here, right, 2 people who got us there, and thereby, naming that there can be no pride for some of us without all of us. In our desire to memorialize Marsha and Sylvia, we can't leave out these unruly bits, right? They're actually among the most precious in their legacy. My hope is that this monument will inspire others to continue working on the dreams that Marsha and Sylvia had, to create a dynamic, nurturing community in New York City where Black and brown, trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people can commune, thrive, and grow together without the threat of violence, prosecution, or discrimination. This is the freedom dream of Sylvia and Marsha. Thank you.
Finally, let's hear from 2 members of the City Council. First, the chair of the Council LGBT Caucus and someone who organized the first Pride Parade in the borough of Queens, council member Danny Drum.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. This is really an incredible occasion, and I'm delighted to be here. And I want to thank, of course, our First Lady for all the work that she has done as well, and she has been a real inspiration to all of us. Let me also thank our speaker, Corey Johnson, who has provided millions of dollars in funding for LGBT and trans organizations that never existed before, and that we're going to work to continue to make sure that we receive our fair share of city funding in this coming budget battle that we have in front of us. And Corey is a hero of mine, and I'm really, really glad to be able to have the opportunity to work as the finance chair with him in the city council. And of course, to all of the other distinguished guests who are here, thank you for being here. I'm delighted to be here for this historic announcement. These monuments will pay tribute to two pioneering LGBTQ rights activists, Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, who weren't afraid to challenge the status quo and shake things up. Rivera and Johnson's activism is rooted in Stonewall. On June 28, 1969, the Stonewall Inn was raided, and Rivera and Johnson were both there. They capitalized on what they saw was the ultimate opportunity for resistance to oppression. Johnson and Rivera were never, ever mainstream. Okay, and they fought back, and as is said before, they were even banned from being in this building. At least Marsha was. They upset Sylvia, excuse me. They upset some members of the community when they rightfully demanded that trans folk be represented in the Christopher Street Liberation Day March. Randy Wicker, who has been acknowledged, he's sitting right back here. Stand up, Randy, for 1 minute. One of the earliest LGBT rights activists ever in our history, was Marsha's roommate, and he has film of Sylvia being almost pushed off the stage in the 1973 Pride March in Greenwich Village when they, went to Washington Square Park for the rally. They upset some members of the community when they rightfully demanded that trans folk be represented in the Christopher Street Liberation Day March. Johnson, realizing how incredibly valuable visibility is to our movement, insisted that LGBTQ people march down Fifth Avenue long before we ever got there. And my earliest memories of Marsha P. Johnson were her standing on the corner with a sign saying, "Nuh-uh, honey, go to Fifth Avenue, don't go up Sixth Avenue." And she would stand there, and everybody said, "Who is this woman?" And she just developed this reputation for herself, and she would push us all over towards Fifth Avenue. And finally, one day, we all decided we were going to take over Fifth Avenue, and that's how we got Fifth Avenue, without a permit. Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera's transformative impact on the movement deserved this public commemoration. Now every New Yorker and visitor who passes by these monuments will be educated on the significance of Johnson and Rivera's lives and work. I want to take this opportunity to thank the administration for paying tribute to these two community heroes. This is truly an exciting and meaningful way of celebrating the 50th anniversary of Stonewall. And let me just also say, this will be my 46th year marching in the Pride parades here. I'm 63 years old. I started when I'm 18, and I love Pride. So, no, never mind.
Finally, want to bring up a leader on both the issues of the LGBT community and on creating a cultural community for everyone, Councilmember Jimmy Van Bramer.
Thank you very much. First, I just want to say thank you to the mayor and the First Lady and all the speakers. But Cecilia, you really moved me tremendously with your words. And I just want to say, from where I was sitting, I could see the glistening in your eyes and the power of that moment for you. And I just want to say there may be 3 current openly gay members of the City Council, but behind me are at least 1 future trans member of the New York City Council. I also want to say this building and this room holds a lot of memories, as Speaker Johnson and Councilmember Drum can attest to. I went to my first center dance here 30 years ago, and I met my first boyfriend in this room. Very handsome Puerto Rican boy. I will not share any more details, Mr. Mayor.
Find one for me.
But also what I found in this building was GLINY, the Gay and Lesbian Youth of New York, which was a gay youth group that I joined. And there I got to meet many trans youth who were members of the Hetrick Martin Institute back in the day. It changed my life forever. And I want to tell a particular story. Andy may know this story a little bit, but I am an Irish American, as are the other two gay council members. And in March of 2000, on St. Patrick's Day, we got arrested trying to march in the St. Patrick's Day parade on Fifth Avenue, which then banned us from marching. Because we insisted on getting arrested, Mayor Giuliani put us through the system, and we were held overnight for 36 hours in jail. And at about 2 o'clock in the morning, as I was in a cell, I heard the legendary Sylvia Rivera giving it to the police officers in a way that could not be repeated right now. Because they were having a discourse about where she should be placed and which pen was appropriate for Sylvia Rivera to be placed in. They thought that she should be placed with the men. She said, "Bullshit, that's not where I'm going." And I'll write this story after my political career, but I spent the night in jail with Sylvia Rivera and learned a lot about how feisty she was and how incredibly fierce she was, because she never backed down the entire time, giving it back and forth to the police who were charged with guarding us and making sure that we didn't move from the 10-foot by 8-foot jail cell that we were in. She was a legend. I didn't meet Marsha P. Johnson, but obviously we are all indebted to them forever and for their courage. So it is a wonderful day for the city of New York that they will be memorialized in this way. Thank you to everyone who made that possible.
Well, as we conclude, I think we have one more thing we have to do, which is we have to make sure that Marsha and Sylvia can hear us singing their praises and giving them the biggest applause they ever got. Right now, everybody. Thank you.